Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to unpack a truly fascinating and incredibly intricate worldview. We are diving into a 2006 essay written by Guy Zhufeng, the founder of Life Chanyuan. The piece is titled The Ultimate Goal of Life. Now, whether you're already deeply familiar with this philosophy or you're just hearing about it for the very first time, the way it challenges our standard perception of reality is just, well, it's incredibly thought-provoking. So we're going to map out exactly how this source material dissects the human condition, and more importantly, the radical alternative it proposes. Let's get into it. Okay, let's dive right into this, because the essay hooks us immediately with a pretty stark premise. The modern human experience is fundamentally misdirected. According to Zhufeng, all that suffering, the anxiety, the sheer exhaustion people have felt for thousands of years, it's not just random misfortune. It's actually the direct result of walking down the wrong path. The text basically says we are lost, just wandering in this boundless sea of bitterness, and it's entirely because we've forgotten what we're actually supposed to be doing here. So you might be wondering, what exactly is this wrong path? Well, it boils down to material distractions. Zhufeng points out that if you ask people what they're so busy doing all day, the answers almost always revolve around earthly pursuits, right? Chasing money, seeking fame, trying to lock down some social status, or just hunting for that next hit of sensory stimulation. The essay argues that building our lives around these material goals inevitably traps us in a cycle of suffering. Because think about it, if everyone is just endlessly chasing material gain, the text argues we inevitably fall into deception, theft, and destroying nature. Without a higher goal, morality basically loses its value, and we're only kept in check by a fear of the law. But then, the source text asks this really blunt, rhetorical question about all this earthly hustle. What's next? You get the money, you get the fame, you glorify your ancestors, and then what? The grim, universally inescapable answer presented in the essay is simply, you die. The text points out the tragic irony here. If the final outcome for every single one of us is death, why do we bother struggling so incredibly hard for material things that we're literally just going to leave behind? It kind of leaves us at a complete dead end. Section 1. The Paradigm Shift, Transcending the Material World. Let's move to and see how this builds, because if the material world is a dead end, Zhufeng argues we urgently need a massive shift in our thinking to escape it. And this brings us to what Life Chanyuan actually defines as the ultimate goal. It's laid out as a fascinating four-step progression. First, we have to appropriately step out of our material reality. Second, we take that energy and focus it on elevating our spirituality. Third, and this is where the cosmology gets highly specific, we have to work to evolve our non-material structures of life. And finally, the ultimate destination, according to the text, is to evolve those structures to achieve the quality of a celestial being. Doing that allows us to migrate to much higher dimensional realms, spaces referred to as the 1,000-year world, the 10,000-year world, and the Elysium world. The essay insists that death is not the end of the road at all, but just a transition into a wider space for survival. Section 2, the illusion of reality, questioning human perception. Now, if you're sitting there thinking that higher dimensional celestial worlds sound a bit like sci-fi, the essay completely anticipates that reaction. And this brilliantly illustrates why. People often pride themselves on being down to earth, right? Only believing what they can physically see. But Zhufeng points out a staggering scientific reality here. What we can actually see with our naked eyes, it accounts for a mere 3% of the universe. Just 3%. The remaining 97% is entirely unknown to our visual senses. So the essay uses this data to argue that we are effectively blind to the vast majority of existence. Therefore, it's highly arrogant to claim that higher-level life spaces don't exist simply because we can't see them right now. The text continues this exact same logic with our hearing. Our auditory perception is physically boxed into this super narrow frequency range of 20 to 20,000 hertz. Anything outside of that tiny window is just dead silence to us, even though those sound waves are absolutely real and passing right through the room you're in. The essay argues that our standard perception of reality is, therefore, incredibly limited and highly deceiving. It sets up this core premise that reality as we experience it is just an illusion. It's a mere manifestation, while the hidden, unseen world holds the true essence of life. To really wrap your head around this, look at how Zhufeng contrasts these two realms. On one side, we have our familiar material world. Space here is just the human world we know, and matter is strictly speed limit bound by the speed of light. But on the flip side, the essay defines a non-material world. This realm reportedly features over 30 dimensions, and it operates by entirely different physical laws. Specifically, it involves non-material spiritual structures operating at a negative speed. The text uses this concept to describe movement that happens instantaneously, way beyond the speed of light. So the argument is that the true essence of life is this spiritual non-material structure that can literally traverse light years in an instant. Section 3, redefining wisdom, moving beyond mere knowledge. Because these two worlds operate on completely different laws, the tools we use to navigate them obviously have to be different too. So the crucial point is that the essay draws a really hard line between standard sensory knowledge and true enlightened wisdom. The text lays out this specific hierarchy. According to Seifeng, wisdom based purely on our five senses is just humanized wisdom, and it sits at the absolute lowest level. The essay argues we've got to scale up through higher levels of spiritual insight, what the text refers to as Deva wisdom and Dharma eyes, all the way up to the ultimate peak, which is Buddha eyes wisdom. The source material asserts that if we don't rely on this deeper spiritual perception, we can't even begin to imagine true wisdom, let alone actually acquire it. Just gathering physical data isn't gonna cut it. True wisdom requires tapping into the non-material. Section 4, the path forward, seeking a guide for the non-material world. This brings us right to the climax of the essay's argument. If the ultimate goal is in a dimension we can't see, operating on rules we don't naturally comprehend, humanity is basically incapable of navigating it on its own. The source uses this incredibly vivid metaphor to drive the point home. Just as a monkey randomly hitting keys for 100 years will never produce Shakespeare, random human effort without spiritual guidance is going to lead us nowhere. We simply don't have the inherent capacity to guess the correct sequence of spiritual evolution. The text asserts it very clearly. We need someone to guide us. But finding that guide is tough, and the essay argues that's mostly because of the overwhelming arrogance of modernity. We've mapped the nanoworld, we've developed quantum mechanics and relativity, and as a result, humans have loudly proclaimed that man can conquer nature. The text actually critiques modern society for arrogantly driving gods, Buddhas, and saints right off their altars. We're using the rudimentary laws of the material world to judge the rules of the non-material world. As Shufeng writes, as humans have become more superficially intelligent and busy, we've actually become more foolish, moving further and further away from the actual truth. To break out of this arrogance, the essay suggests we look to topology, specifically the Mobius strip. It's used here as a really powerful metaphor. A Mobius strip is a surface with only one side and one boundary. It twists right back on itself. Schwefeng argues that our standard logical reasoning and standard philosophy can actually lead us totally astray. To truly understand the vast truth of the universe, we have to apply the principle of the Mobius strip to our own brains. We must use unconventional thinking, literally turning our minds upside down to expose the truth that's hidden behind all these material illusions. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the final takeaway. Shufeng ultimately tells us that supreme wisdom is formless, but notice the extremely specific instruction given at the end of the essay. By visualization, our wish will come true. The text explicitly notes that this does not say by thinking. It's a deliberate call to move past the rational, calculating, material brain, and instead utilize spiritual visualization to bridge the gap to those higher, non-material realms. To reach the ultimate goal, you literally have to bypass the tangible to enter the intangible. Which leaves us with this final, profound question inspired directly by the source material. Guy Shufeng's essay challenges absolutely everything about how we prioritize our daily lives. It asks us to look past that meager 3% of the universe we can physically see and to stop torturing ourselves over material dead ends. So the question is, will you continue down the well-worn, exhausted path of our ancestors, or are you ready to turn your mind upside down and explore the ultimate goal of life? It's definitely a fascinating perspective to ponder. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning what you see.